What happens when one of Hollywood's most well-liked and humble actors is pushed past his total limit on live television? What we observed on the Drew Barrymore show was nothing less than startling, and once this video is over, you will understand exactly why Keanu Reeves left that stage, and why he might never appear on daytime television again. Be sure to subscribe and leave a comment below because this story grows more intense with every second that passes. It began like any other Tuesday morning recording. The studio audience was buzzing with anticipation. The cameras were capturing everything and Drew Barrymore had her usual bright excitement shining from her host chair. But what no one in that audience anticipated was seeing one of the most awkward celebrity talks in recent memory. A moment that would make Keanu Reeves question everything concerning the entertainment business. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Keanu Reeves," Drew declared with her normal joyful energy, her hands clapping quickly as the crowd erupted with cheers. Keanu walked out dressed in his typical black suit, that familiar modest smile on his face as he waved to the crowd. He sat down in the guest seat, adjusting his jacket slightly, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Keanu, it is so wonderful to have you here," Drew started, leaning forward with a drive that seemed just a little too keen. "I have to tell you, I've been wanting to ask you some things that I think our viewers are truly curious about." "Thank you for inviting me, Drew. I'm happy to be here," Keanu answered, his voice having that calm, steady manner that followers have grown to appreciate. There was something authentic in the way he spoke. No pretending, no Hollywood acting. "So, let's jump right in," Drew continued, her smile becoming wider in a way that didn't quite meet her eyes. "I've been reading about your private life, and I need to ask, don't you find it a bit odd that someone your age is still unmarried? I mean, most successful men your age have settled down already." The question lingered in the air like a harmful cloud. Keanu's face changed a little, the warmth in his eyes fading just a bit. "Well, I believe everyone's journey is unique, Drew. I don't really see my relationship status as a thing that shows my worth or my achievements." "But come on," Drew pushed, her voice adopting a sharper tone disguised as playful conversation. "You're Keanu Reeves, you could have anyone you wish. Are you holding out for someone impossibly perfect? Or are there perhaps some problems we don't know about?" The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the cheerful celebrity talk they had been waiting for. Keanu's jaw tensed almost unnoticeably, but his voice stayed level. "I think that is a very personal question, and I'm not sure it's really connected to why I'm here today. I thought we were going to discuss my coming film." "Oh, we will get to that." Drew gestured away, clearly enjoying the awkwardness she was creating. "But our viewers want to know the genuine Keanu. They want to figure out why someone who appears so flawless on the outside cannot keep a long-term relationship. Is it trouble committing? Are you fearful of closeness?" "Drew, I genuinely don't think this is appropriate," Keanu stated, his voice still relaxed, but with a firmness that anyone paying attention would have seen as a warning. "My private relationships are not entertainment for your audience. Everything is entertainment, Keanu." Drew shot back, her friendly host look vanishing for just a moment. "That is the business we are in. You came on my program, so you accepted this conversation. Actually, I came on your program to advertise a movie that I am passionate about, to discuss the skill of acting and to connect with people who value films." Keanu responded, his self-control amazing given the situation. "I did not agree to have my private life broken down for better viewer numbers." The tension in the studio was becoming noticeable. People in the audience were looking at each other, and even the camera operators seemed to be concentrating more closely, realizing that something important was occurring. Drew, however, seemed fueled by the disagreement she had started. "Listen, I understand," she went on with fake sympathy. "It must be tough being the gloomy, solitary man in Hollywood, the tragic person who lost his partner and his child and never recovered. I mean, that is the story everyone talks about, right?" The words struck Keanu like physical hits, his face became completely still. And for a moment, the only noise in the studio was the buzzing of the cameras and the awkward shifting of the audience. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, but carried a weight that made everyone in the room listen. "That's enough," he said simply. "What do you mean that's enough?" Drew chuckled, but there was something forced about it now. "We are just having a discussion here. This is what talk shows are for." "No, Drew, this is what poor talk shows are for," Keanu replied, his calm still present, but his words having a sharpness that sliced through the studio air. "Good talk shows are about connecting with others, sharing stories that matter, and treating guests with simple human respect." "Oh please," Drew scoffed, her show of friendliness completely gone. "Now, don't lecture me about respect when you've spent your whole profession playing the same moody character repeatedly. At least I'm trying to show people who you truly are." "You have no idea who I truly am," Keanu stated, standing up from his seat slowly. The movement was deliberate, controlled, but there was something about it that made the whole studio stop breathing. "And honestly, after this talk, I'm not sure you have any idea who you truly are either." The audience was totally quiet now, observing this strange event happen. Drew's face turned red, whether from shame or anger. It was impossible to know. "Excuse me," she said, her voice getting slightly louder. "I know exactly who I am. I'm someone who asks the questions that are important, who doesn't let famous people hide behind their press people and their carefully planned images." "You're someone who believes that unkindness disguised as interest is journalism," Keanu replied, his voice still remarkably steady. "You're someone who mistakes invading privacy for being real. The words landed with shattering accuracy. Drew's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find a clever response, but nothing came out. The quiet went on, becoming more uncomfortable with every second that passed. The uneasy silence that followed Keanu's words seemed to go on forever. But it was Drew who finally broke it, her voice now holding a defensive edge that everyone in the studio could hear. "You know what, Keanu? I think you're being incredibly unfair right now," she said, folding her arms and leaning back in her chair. "I'm trying to have a genuine discussion with you, not some clean, perfect publicity interview that everyone else does. A genuine discussion requires mutual respect," Keanu replied, still standing but not attempting to depart. "It involves actually listening to what the other person is saying instead of just waiting for your next chance to attack." "Attack?" Drew's voice rose higher and she gave a fake laugh. "I'm asking reasonable questions that millions of people want answers to. You're a famous person, Keanu. This is part of the job. Being a famous person doesn't mean giving up your humanity," Keanu said, his voice carrying a sadness that made several audience members shift uneasily. "It doesn't mean that every painful point of your life becomes material for someone else's amusement." Drew's expression hardened. "Oh, so now I'm supposed to feel sorry for you? The wealthy film star who is paid crazy amounts of money to pretend to be other people. Please, this isn't about money, Drew. It's about simple decent behavior," Keanu responded, his patience clearly running out despite his outwardly calm appearance. "Something you seem to have forgotten in your search for popular moments." "Popular moments?" Drew stood up suddenly, her chair moving backward. "Is that what you think this is about? You think I'm some kind of host desperate for social media attention looking for clicks? I think you're someone who has lost track of what talking actually involves," Keanu said quietly. "I think you've mixed up questioning with interviewing. Embarrassment with sincerity." The audience was completely absorbed now watching this verbal fight happen. Some were filming on their phones despite the rule against recording, realizing they were seeing something never before seen. "You want sincerity?" Drew's voice got louder again, her professional front breaking completely. "Here is some sincerity for you. You come on these shows with your mysterious humble act, pretending to be this perfect gentleman, but everyone knows you're just a broken guy who can't move forward from his past." The unkindness in her words was shocking. Several audience members took in a sharp breath, and one person actually stood up as if they were going to step in. Keanu's face turned completely pale, but when he spoke, his voice was solid as steel. "And you think that pain is something to be used for entertainment?" he said. "You think that someone else's sorrow is a plaything for you to use on television? I think that if you can't handle the criticism, you shouldn't have entered this business." Drew shot back, her voice now clearly unfriendly. "Everyone has difficulties, Keanu. Everyone deals with loss. The difference is that most people don't get to hide behind this perfect image while receiving checks for millions of dollars." "You're right about one thing," Keanu said, agreeing slowly. "Everyone deals with loss, but not everyone turns that understanding into a weapon to hurt other people. Not everyone thinks that suffering is a weakness to be laughed at." Drew's face turned red again. "I'm not making fun of anything. I'm attempting to have an adult discussion about real existence, something you clearly cannot manage." "An adult discussion would include kindness and understanding," Keanu replied. "It would involve realizing that the person sitting opposite you is a human being, not just content for your program." "Don't lecture me about kindness," Drew snapped. "You don't know anything about my life, about what I've gone through, about the struggles I've had to overcome to get where I am." "You're absolutely right," Keanu said, his voice becoming calmer slightly. "I don't know your story, and I wouldn't dare to use your pain for my amusement. I wouldn't search through your private sadness and display them on television like prizes." The words landed accurately. Drew's mouth became tight, and for a moment something fragile showed on her face before the unfriendliness returned. "That's different," she said weakly. "How is it different?" Keanu asked. "Because you're the one asking the questions. Because you're the one holding the microphone. That doesn't make your pain any less real, and it doesn't make mine any less worthy of respect." "Stop trying to switch this around on me," Drew said, her voice getting to almost a yell. "You came on my program. You accepted to be here. If you can't handle a few difficult questions, maybe you should stick to action movies where you don't have to use your brain too hard." The mean comment was small and desperate, and everyone in the studio could sense it. Keanu stood there for a moment, looking at Drew with something that might have been pity. "You know what is truly sad about this entire situation?" he said finally. "It's that somewhere beneath all this anger and need to create drama, there is probably a good person who simply forgot how to connect with people without harming them first." Drew's eyes showed rage. "Don't you dare analyze me. Don't you dare stand there and pretend you're superior to me." "I'm not pretending anything," Keanu said. "I'm just sad that this is what television has become. I'm sad that being kind is seen as weakness and that cruelty is mistaken for strength." "Oh, spare me the deep-thinking nonsense," Drew said in a dismissive way. "This is the actual world, Keanu. This is how things really operate. If you can't handle reality, maybe you should go back to your pretend movie sets." "The reality is that there are still people in this world who believe in treating each other with respect," Keanu replied. "The reality is that some of us still think talking should be about understanding, not winning an argument. Understanding doesn't get high ratings," Drew said directly, and the sincerity of the statement seemed to shock even her. "And there it is," Keanu said quietly. That is the truth you've been avoiding this whole time. None of this is about understanding me or giving your viewers a look into who I am. It's about creating a public scene at my expense." The admission remained in the air between them like a confession. Drew's admission about ratings stayed in the studio air like poisonous smoke. And for a moment, she seemed to realize what she had just admitted. Her face went through a series of emotions, from surprise at her own words to anger at being pushed into sincerity. "That's not what I intended," she said quickly, trying to reverse her statement. "I meant that people want real conversations, genuine moments, not the fake things that most famous people try to sell." "No," Keanu said firmly. And there was something in his voice that made everyone in the studio listen closely. "You meant exactly what you said. You just admitted that using people's pain for high ratings is more important to you than treating them like human beings." Drew's calm was completely gone now. "You're changing my words. You're making me sound like some kind of monster when all I'm attempting to do is my work." "Your work is to interview people, not to disturb them," Keanu replied. "Your work is to help conversation, not to create unkindness for material." "Stop acting like I'm hurting you," Drew said, her voice becoming high-pitched. "These are just questions. If you can't handle a few personal questions, maybe you're not as mentally sound as everyone thinks you are." The harshness of the statement was startling. Several audience members gasped, and one woman actually stood up and started walking toward the exit. The idea that asking private questions about someone's deepest painful experiences was somehow a test of their mental stability was so fundamentally incorrect that it seemed to break something in the room. Keanu stood perfectly still for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than it had been all day. But it carried more influence than anything else he had said. "There it is," he said. "The real Drew Barrymore. Someone who thinks that questioning a person's mental stability is a suitable answer to being called out for harsh behavior." "I didn't mean it that way," Drew said quickly. But her voice lacked belief. "Yes, you did," Keanu said simply. "And you know what the truly sad part is? You probably don't even realize how far you've moved away from who you used to be." There was a time when Drew Barrymore represented toughness, for getting past hard times, for showing kindness to people who were struggling. Drew's face became slightly sad, and for a moment the mask fell completely. "Don't you dare talk about my past. Don't you dare use my history against me." "I'm not using anything against you," Keanu said gently. "I'm trying to remind you of you once were before you decided that other people's suffering was something to be taken for television success." "You don't know anything about who I am," Drew said. But her voice was weaker now, defending rather than attacking. "I know enough to be let down," Keanu said. And the sadness in his voice was genuine. "I know enough to see that somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing guests as people and started seeing them as material." The studio was completely quiet except for the buzz of cameras that were still running, recording every word of this never-before-seen breaking down of the typical talk show structure. "You want to know who I truly am?" Drew said, her voice rising again as she tried to regain control. "I'm someone who has worked incredibly hard to build a career, to create something valuable, to connect with others, and I'm not going to let some self-important movie star come on my program and lecture me about how to do my job." "I'm not lecturing you about your job," Keanu said. "I'm wondering whether you remember what your job actually involves, because right now it seems like your job is to cause pain to people for fun." "My job is to ask the questions that matter," Drew shot back. "No," Keanu said firmly. "Your job is to create a place where people feel secure enough to share what they want to share. Your job is to encourage genuine connection, not to make people live through their worst experiences for your audience's pleasure." Drew was clearly fighting now, stuck between continuing her aggressive style and realizing the truth in what Keanu was saying. "People want sincerity, they want real conversations. People want to be real, not to be used," Keanu corrected. "There's a difference between someone choosing to tell their story and someone being forced into revealing their pain." "I never forced anyone," Drew said. But her voice lacked belief. "You forced me from the moment I sat down," Keanu said quietly. "You decided before this interview even started that my private sadness was going to be your entertainment for the day." The accusation stayed in the air, and Drew's face went through a series of emotions as she accepted the truth of it. "I was just attempting to have a meaningful conversation," she said weakly. "No. You were attempting to create a popular moment at my expense," Keanu said. "And the truly sad part is that you probably convinced yourself that using people was the same thing as reporting." Drew's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice again. "Get off my stage," she said suddenly, her voice sharp with anger and shame. "I was already going," Keanu said simply. And there was no anger in his voice, just a deep sadness. "I just wanted you to understand what you had turned into before I did." He turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at Drew, who was standing behind her desk, looking smaller than she had at the start of the show. "I hope you find your way back to who you used to be," he said quietly. "Because that person was worth knowing." With that, Keanu Reeves walked off the stage, leaving behind a studio full of shocked audience members and a host who had just been given the most terrible job criticism of her profession. The cameras kept rolling as Drew stood there, clearly shaken, attempting to process what had just happened. "We'll be right back," she said weakly to the cameras. But everyone knew that nothing would be the same after the commercial break. What we observed that day was not just a famous person leaving a talk show. It was a perfect display of keeping one's dignity under pressure, in telling the truth to authority, and in refusing to let cruelty pretend to be entertainment. Keanu Reeves showed us all what it looks like when someone refuses to take part in their own shaming, and by doing so, he revealed something basic about the current state of celebrity culture and daytime television. Be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. And let me know in the comments what you think about famous people who refuse to participate with intrusive interview methods.